Hello and welcome to Faragadamu. The Ethiopian government this week unveiled an ambitious electrification project. What is the target here in a country that is suffering from limited coverage beset by power cuts? My guest today, Dr. Seleshi Bekele, is a Minister of Water, Irrigation and Electricity. Dr. Seleshi Bekele, very warm welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Early this week, you launched a nearly $400 million project, Light for All, in 7 years' time. It's quite an ambitious project. Can you explain a little bit?
Yes, it is an ambitious project. Light for All is an important vision setting towards enabling energy access for all of Ethiopians. The $375 million is actually an initial financing, but it requires the overall financing requirement is like 1.5 billion US dollars. So the program entails actually a number of components. The overarching goal is to have 100% access of electricity to all Ethiopians.
In 7 years?
Yes, in 7 years. That is time period at which we say Ethiopia becomes middle-income country. Middle-income country, requires these kinds of basic facilities like energy access, water access, and so on. So within that framework, we are aspiring to do this in a number of ways. One, the expansion of grid network that is currently ongoing. Within that grid network, we have reached, the expansion of the grid to 60%, but access to electricity, actual access to electricity is 30%, where 3 million households, nearly 3 million households have got connection. Also in Ethiopian lifestyle, in the neighborhood also you see that some people pull wires from their neighbors, and through that about 30 million people. So that is where we are now. We need to first of all densify the connectivity, where we have got already the expansion of the grid, which reached 60% of the country. That densification means you pull the wire from the electric lines to the end users, like the households, or wherever another sort of electricity consumption is needed, you supply those electricity. So that is the densification, which brings additional 4.5 million households. That is like a low-hanging fruit where you have to really focus and fulfill that connectivity. So this could be done in a few years.
Well, it's interesting. If you want to have the Ethiopian population, which by then would probably be over 110 million,
120 million, maybe
120 million. Yeah. So it took us almost a century.
Yeah.
To enable 30 million Ethiopians have access to electricity. Now we want to achieve the 70 in 7 years' time. It's not just an ambitious project, but it's something that's not realistic.
If I could explain, what are the components, how do we reach? There are so many new innovations and technologies that help us to do so. First of all, this Universal Energy Access Program has been under implementation for the last few years, which enabled access to 6,200, towns, rural villages, and cities. That Universal Energy Access Program expansion of the grid will continue. The users are organized. We can increase the number of this association of users who could do the expansion of the grid. So with that also we could bring additional 7 million in the 7 year period, 7 million households. But the third component is off-grid technology.
Talking about solar and wind and everything.
35% of the population, or about 7 million of the household, could not be accessed through the grid expansion. If you attempt to do that grid expansion right now, it will be inefficient, and you will lose a lot of energy just to reach at 5 or 6 households with expansion of grid network is not feasible. Therefore, we need to see the new technologies that are becoming very popular.
How well invested are you in those technologies now? I mean, where do you stand as far as the off-grid?
We started, through the private sector, through loan financing to the private sector. At the Development Bank of Ethiopia, for example, we used about $20 million, and the second $20 million is now under investment. It looks into continuum of technology. It starts from individual household, where we have got household system, solar household system, that provides light, charging of mobile phones or connecting to the TV and so on. This kind of basic electricity use could happen from solar home system. Then wherever you have got village or kabbales and so on, you can also provide off-grid solution, what we call mini-grids. Mini-grids that could use the sun energy to convert that to electricity is possible. In the daylight, you collect the energy and store it in the battery, and the battery could actually supply the needed electricity in the evenings. So it's about creating this access is very critical and also transformative in terms of when you look at the rural population, they still live in the darkness. Oh. So we have to move. If we want to move our country to middle income, we have to enable access to electricity.
So you're saying you're not going to use kerosene in 7 years' time, you're not going to use firewood in 7 years' time, so everything that's going to be shelved. Is that what you're going to say? Is that what you're saying?
That's the ambition. You know, use of kerosene is not a cheap thing. Actually, it's expensive also.
But in the absence of in the absence of power, definitely you're bound to use it.
Of course, in the rural households, they use not only kerosene, also firewood, and it's consuming a lot of natural resources. And at household level, when you have smokes and so on, it's unhealthy for people cooking and so on and so forth. So that has to transform. And also people in the rural area should have access to information. Information cannot be achieved unless you have, these modern gadgets, including telephone, radio.
And your smartphones too.
Yes. Exactly.
But the demand is soaring, right? As we speak, rapid urbanization, industrialization, you have those big projects being put in place across the country. I'm talking about industrial parks. There's so much investment, foreign and domestic, and the need for power is soaring by the day. Yes. You're not catching up. You're not catching up, and that puts you in a very difficult position, right?
We are working, actually. Yes, it is a challenge that as a nation we have to really confront with, and we are doing well, actually. In terms of generation, if you look at electricity generation, we have right now 4,300 megawatt, which is the second large energy generation in sub-Saharan Africa. And currently also we are constructing actually nearly 9,000 megawatt, more than double of what we have right now. So this will be completed in the next few years. That means like Gannale Dawa, which is producing 254 megawatt, Koisha, Grand Renaissance Dam. Adding all this together, for example, the 3 hydropower schemes, you can say we have additional nearly 9,000 megawatt. That means we are moving fast in terms of achieving our ambitious goal in energy generation of reaching 17,000 megawatt. We are nearly now 14,000 megawatt under construction. Many of them are also under the bid process. For example, recently we concluded the bid. It's now in the implementation agreement phase for solar power generation of 100 megawatt. The solar, the ultimate source of energy is the sun. Sun helps us to have hydrologic circulation, even evaporate water from the sea, and then rainfall, and then comes in the rivers, and from the river you harness hydropower. So the initial source is solar.
So that's going to feed into the national grid?
That is going to feed into the national grid. It's a big generation capacity, 100 megawatt. When you look in the order of priorities of generation up to now, in the 4,300 megawatt, we have the hydropower, which constitutes 3,800 megawatt. We have the wind, like the Ashagoda, the Adama 1 and the 2, which is generating 354 megawatt. Then next comes actually at this stage is diesel generators, also still contribute 143 megawatt. We want to also replace this diesel generator with renewable energy that in order to really meet our climate resilient green economy strategy. These are also expensive. When you have diesel generator, they consume a lot of fuel, and therefore they have to be replaced by either solar technology or through the grid technology. Then we have geothermal. Solar is coming up. So we are really bringing a lot of energy mixes.
But as we speak, it's a challenge. Power is the challenge, right? I mean, all the major investments in this country that I'm aware of have on the side big generators. Quite often there are, power cuts and everything.
We are also investing on that.
What's the problem? What's going wrong with it on that track?
Power distribution is another issue. Generation is one thing. We are successful in the generation. The distribution part to large demand areas is problematic. Now we are overhauling actually the systems in major cities. Like right now we are overhauling eight cities, Addis Ababa, Dredwa, Bekele, and so on. In those places we are rehabilitating the existing schemes. Imagine a few years back, Addis Ababa was not like today. Due to rapid growth of Addis Ababa city, you see a lot of buildings, a lot of service sector booming. In a place where you have got a villa, you replaced it by a big building. But your electric system is, with very thin wire that was there for many years. That has to be replaced. Therefore, the energy consumption per unit area in the urban area actually substantial increase. Therefore, we have to rehabilitate the system so that it gets sufficient capacity.
Why is it taking this long to get that replaced?
Yes, it is. In some places it has been replaced, but the rapid urbanization and the growth is really immense. For example, to build one substation that brings substantial energy in particular locality or subsidy takes a lot of time. Perhaps it takes 2 years. Just to build substations that this brings energy to that concentrated area and distribute. So therefore, you have to do that. It requires investment. Right now, we are investing about $45 million to rehabilitate Addis Ababa alone. But also, we are adding additional $100 million to rehabilitate Addis Ababa alone, getting a loan from African Development.
When is this going to stop?
It will never stop, actually.
It will never stop, but
This process is a dynamic process,
It is, but
it comes with growth. It will continue to. You have to catch up, actually, with this kind of expansion, upgrading, and working towards the growth.
Gerd, the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, hydro is top of the list as far as energy generation in this country is concerned because we're utilizing all our rivers as we speak. But so much controversy. I mean, in the last few days and a couple of weeks, the rhetoric has resurfaced and the Egyptians are not happy. They actually are pulling out.
Not happy? I don't know. We have the right to develop our resource. All this water in the Nile, mainly coming from Ethiopia. We have that clear understanding of equitable utilization of the resource. We fully understand actually this cooperation is very important. We work toward this win-win solution and not just one part benefits and the other part remain in poverty. We need GERD to transform our socio-economy because our energy demand is rapidly growing as you asked earlier, for example, in industrial parks and the transport sector and so on. The growth of energy is predicted to be really very, very rapid. Like annually, this time, for example, we need an expansion of 1,600 megawatt energy for the industrial parks and agro-processing centers. That means huge additional energy is needed. Unless we develop our resource like the hydro, where we have got the highest potential, we cannot catch up with the socio-economic transformation needs and poverty alleviation needs. So in working on GERD, It's a project that is well studied and an energy consumption project. That means water used only to generate electricity, not consumed in the process, but modifies the hydrological system. That means instead of the flow taking place between the period of June to October only, it will be redistributed to flow throughout the year in more or less in uniform pattern. Beyond that, hydropower doesn't consume water at all. And we all Ethiopians are puzzled why Egyptians are really arguing on this hydro dam project. Yes, we are not consuming water. Even if we consume, we have also the right in equitable manner without causing significant harm. So our reasoning is really on principled basis, on internationally recognized principles and laws. So the declaration of principle also, where the three countries have actually, the heads of state have assigned.
But their point is the negotiations are going on while the GERD is being built, and it's taking forever, and there has to be a conclusion at some point. And the Ethiopians are dragging their feet. That's their argument.
No, this is completely wrong. This is just a wrong accusation. We have to see the process, the historical process around the GERD. The GERD is not about really negotiation around the comprehensive framework agreement or water sharing issue. It's not. This is just a project. This project, from the initial inception and construction and so on, we invited Sudan and Egypt to look at the project, share with them the information.
Once the project was started?
Once the project started, they complained that it will harm us.
So you brought them over to have a look?
Exactly.
But it's just bringing the cart before the horse.
The study was made from many years back. We have many hydropower potential sites. This is one of the four major hydropower sites, which is what we call the border dam. It's the ideal site where all the tributary rivers actually enter into the Nile, the Abai River system. And at that point, we identified the dam, which is an optimal site where we have got two hills. Between the hills, you can dam and have optimal reservoir site. So that has been studied. It's been even in the plan for infrastructure development in Africa ideas. What are the major infrastructure that Africa could benefit from, like the Inga Dam, which generates even huge amount of electricity in the Congo River, this Grand Renaissance Dam, and other dams are identified as priority infrastructure development in Africa. So it's not really, as you said, bringing the cart before the horse. It has been there, but even if it came at this point as a new, we were actually communicating with them to share with them. We're proceeding with this project. The project will not bring any significant harm into the downstream countries. Therefore, we start.
But what would you say to an ordinary Egyptian farmer? I was there about 6 or 7 months back in a village called Fayoum, just an hour's drive outside of Cairo, and I was talking to this Egyptian farmers and business people, and there is not a drop of water out there. It's just as dry as hell. What would you say to this? What's wrong? I mean, what's wrong with these people saying whatever they're saying? Like the Ethiopians are going to strangle us because with the construction of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. I don't see that as a problem because there is enormous amount of fear among Egyptian farmers. Why didn't they get it right? You think that's what you're alluding to, aren't you?
Exactly. I think it's important really to tell frank and accurate information to the people. Grand Renaissance Dam, as such, is not consuming water. It just redistributes the hydrology. It's actually the bank of water. It's as if you put money in the bank in order to really have the benefit of interest rate or even benefit of overcoming certain difficult periods. The GERD is providing additional storage. It's nearly at the border of the Sudan with Ethiopia. And in Ethiopia, we don't have consumptive use from the GERD reservoir. We may come up with other reservoirs in future to generate electricity or develop irrigation, things like that, where we could discuss and on all those situations also we could communicate with in terms of information. But on the GERD, it brings actually benefits into the downstream countries. The benefits that could come is, number one, from storage. Number two, the reservoir is built at higher elevation and the evaporation is much minimal. Therefore, it saves water than actually having a lot of evaporation in the downstream reservoirs. Number three, it actually saves water because when you store water instead of flooding, for example, in the plains of Sudan, in the rainy season, a lot of water is wasted due to evaporation. Once it is flooded, water will not flow back, but it evaporates into the atmosphere. So that water will be saved. And the flow from the dam continues to flow downstream after it hits the turbine. This is also actually the natural right of Ethiopia to benefit from its rivers. Generally, Africa cannot remain in the darkness forever. The gap, 70 million people are living in the darkness while the river is just flowing, taking the potential away. We have to tap into that opportunity, transform our economy, build our industries, and,
Why is the Prime Minister not visiting Cairo? I mean, there's been a standing invitation from the Egyptian side ever since President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi visited Ethiopia. When was it?
I think at some point the Prime Minister visits, there is no issue with that. Ethiopia and Egypt have got so many bilateral cooperation areas where the leaders could discuss. It's not merely about GERD or Nile. There are so many socio-economic issues they are discussing. So I'm sure there will be some visit. If I'm part of the visiting team, I will participate. 2 weeks ago, I was in Cairo. We are negotiating among the three ministers around the GERD. There is no significant issue. For me, there is no significant issue. We haven't built GERD just to put an African white elephant, rather to store water and generate electricity. I think we will come with certain conclusion, I'm sure. So there is no also very serious issues that harms Egypt or Sudan, but actually brings benefit.
Irrigation comes to mind. We're heavily dependent on rain-fed agriculture.
Yes.
And you think of irrigation, which seems like a pipe dream.
We have certain potential. As you know, Ethiopia is a rugged country, is not having a lot of plain areas, especially where the water is. There is certain scope to develop irrigation in Ethiopia. So looking at agriculture, actually, agricultural water management broadly is very important. We have to, think about not only input supplies like fertilizer and seeds, but also have to think how we manage water, including the rain-fed system. So irrigation provides a huge opportunity because we're rapidly growing population. The country is really booming in terms of the number of population. So food production must be intensified. Irrigation provides an opportunity. We can develop irrigation from groundwater, from managing the rainwater by tapping water from the river sources. So there are ample opportunities actually to develop irrigation. If you take, for example, Asian Revolution, they were not only focusing on seed and fertilizer, but they were really also worked a lot on agriculture water management, where the rainwater managed, the groundwater is utilized, the river systems are tapped actually to bring that aspired green revolution. In agricultural sector, Ethiopia is doing well in terms of increasing productivity, but the last mile real productivity should come also through managing agricultural water very carefully.
Wow. Dr. Seleshi, Bekele, thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you on my show.
Thank you very much. Thank you.